Welcome back, everyone. Today, we're doing things a little differently for our deep dive. We're going to be looking at Thailand, but through a pretty unique lens. We found this German-language podcast called Thailand Aktuell.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and we thought, why not see what's making headlines for German speakers interested in Thailand?
I love it. It's always fascinating to see how different cultures view the same topics.
Exactly. It's hosted by Nerichaya and Samu. And honestly, just browsing through their episode list, it seems like they cover a really wide range of stuff.
Well, let's dive in then. What caught your eye?
Well, right off the bat, there's talk about a possible new tourism tax. 300 baht for anyone arriving by air.
So like a departure tax, but upon arrival.
Yeah, exactly. But here's the thing. Expats would be exempt.
Oh, that's interesting. So it seems like they're really targeting short-term visitors with
Well,
this. Probably trying to, generate some revenue specifically from tourism.
Yeah, that makes sense. Although I can imagine it being a little confusing for tourists,
Yeah.
especially if they haven't done their research beforehand.
Oh, absolutely. Picture this. You just landed in Thailand after a long flight, excited for your vacation, and bam, hit with an unexpected tax.
Not the best welcome.
Definitely not. It sounds like they're still hammering out the details, though. They're planning to present it to the cabinet for approval in January, so we'll have to wait and see how it all shakes out.
Speaking of things that could potentially shake things up, the podcast also talked about some possible changes to Thailand's retirement system, specifically raising the retirement age to 65.
That's pretty significant. I mean, it's a big change for anyone approaching retirement age, and it could have ripple effects throughout the economy.
It's definitely a trend we're seeing in a lot of countries, though, right? As life expectancy increases, retirement systems have to adapt.
Yeah, you're right. It makes you think about how different countries are grappling with the challenges of an aging population and what those long-term implications will be. Not just for retirees themselves, but for, like you said, the overall economy and social safety net.
And they didn't just talk about raising the retirement age. They also mentioned possibly including migrant workers and self-employed people in the social security system.
Whoa, that would be huge EE. It's a pretty bold move. It could potentially provide a much-needed safety net for a significant portion of the population, but it would also be logistically complex.
Yeah, definitely. It would be a massive undertaking to figure out how to implement that fairly and effectively. You have to consider things like contributions, how benefits would be calculated, and how it would be funded.
Absolutely. And, any changes to Social Security are always bound to be a bit controversial. People have strong opinions about it.
For sure. It'll be interesting to see how the Thai people respond to these proposed changes. It's definitely something to keep an eye on.
Definitely. Okay, so what else is making headlines in the Thailand Aktuell world?
Well, this one's a bit of a head-scratcher. It seems like a prominent monk in Thailand, a guy named Wee Watchermedi, has gotten involved in a pyramid scheme.
Oh, wow. That's not something you hear every day.
Right. It's kind of surprising. I mean, he's this well-respected figure, and then you have this whole pyramid scheme thing going on, which is, inherently exploitative. It's a pretty strange juxtaposition.
It is. I'm immediately thinking about the ethical implications here. Buddhism generally emphasizes compassion and non-attachment to material wealth.
Exactly. And pyramid schemes are all about, well, the opposite of that, right? It's about convincing people to invest in something that promises quick riches, often at the expense of others. It seems like a pretty clear contradiction to Buddhist teachings.
It really makes you think about the complexities of religious figures in today's world, right? We often put them on a pedestal, but they're human beings too, susceptible to the same temptations and failings as anyone else.
You're right. It's a good reminder to be critical thinkers, even when it comes to those we admire or see as authorities.
Absolutely. We shouldn't blindly follow anyone, regardless of their position or status. It's important to question things and think for ourselves.
Okay, so moving on from ethical dilemmas to something a bit more serious, the podcast also touched on a story about a German expat in Thailand who's been accused of child prostitution.
Oh, wow. That's heavy stuff.
Yeah, it's definitely a sensitive and disturbing topic. But it's also important to note that at this point, these are just accusations. There hasn't been any concrete evidence presented.
Right, and it sounds like there might be some personal conflicts involved that could be influencing the situation. It's really tricky when you have these kinds of allegations without clear evidence to back them up.
It really underscores the challenges of navigating legal systems in foreign countries, too. Different laws, different procedures, and potentially different cultural norms around justice and due process.
It's a reminder to be cautious about rushing to judgment, especially when we're dealing with situations that are complex and involve different cultural contexts.
Exactly. It's easy to form opinions based on limited information, but it's crucial to remember that there's often more to the story than meets the eye.
Okay, so where we go from here? What other headlines caught your attention?
Well, we've got stories about youth gang violence, a high-stakes arrest, and even some wild weather.
Sounds like we've got a lot more to unpack. So this next one, it takes us to Shanghai, and it seems like there's a bit of a growing problem with youth gang violence up there.
Oh, wow. Really?
Yeah, the podcast even mentioned some of the names of these gangs, like Chantra, No Way, and Three Tigers.
Those names almost sound like, I don't know, something out of a movie or a video game or something.
Yeah, it sounds a little sensationalized, right? But the reality is their activities are causing some serious problems in the community.
It makes you think about, like, what's driving these kids to join gangs in the first place.
Exactly. I mean, often youth gangs emerge in places where young people, maybe feel like they don't have a lot of opportunities, or maybe they're looking for a sense of belonging, something like that. So it makes you wonder, what's the situation in Chiang Rai? Like, what kind of support systems are there for young people? What can be done to maybe address some of these root causes?
Yeah, it's a complex issue for sure. It's not just about cracking down on the gangs themselves, right?
Right.
You have to look at the bigger picture, the social and economic factors that might be contributing to it.
Absolutely. Okay, speaking of crime, this next story takes us to Pattaya, and it's about the arrest of a former Chinese bank manager.
Oh, really?
Yeah, a guy named Wang Luan Fa. And he was arrested in connection with a massive fraud case. Like, we're talking 200 million baht.
Oh, 200 million. That's a lot of money. What happened?
Well, that's the thing. It's a bit of a mystery. He's claiming he used all that money for personal debts. But when they arrested him, they found a large sum of cash on him. So it's like, something doesn't quite add up here.
Yeah, that's pretty fishy. So why Pattaya? Why was he there?
Well, to make it even more intriguing, it seems like he entered Thailand illegally from Cambodia. So you got to wonder, if he was trying to, maybe escape justice, why choose such a high-profile touristy place like Pattaya? Wouldn't it make more sense to lay low somewhere else?
Maybe he thought he could blend in with the crowds. I don't know. Or maybe he had some connections there, people he thought could help him out.
Yeah, who knows? It's a real head scratcher. And it'll be interesting to see how this case plays out. Will he be extradited back to China? What's going to happen to the money they recovered? Lots of questions.
Definitely. Okay, so from international intrigue to, I guess you could say, the forces of nature, the Thailand Aktuell podcast also covered the latest weather forecast, and it sounds like the cool season might be arriving a little later than usual this year.
Yeah, they were saying that up north, people can expect those cooler temperatures, maybe even some frost. But down south, it's a different story. They're actually bracing for heavy rain and potential storms.
Oh, wow. That's quite a contrast. Talk about packing for all occasions.
Seriously, you'd need everything from sweaters to raincoats if you were planning a trip to Thailand right now. But beyond the immediate impact on, like, travel and stuff, the weather report also highlighted some of those bigger environmental concerns. Like, they were talking about elevated levels of PM 2.5 air pollution in Bangkok, for example.
Yeah, that's definitely a problem we've been seeing in a lot of major cities around the world, unfortunately. That air pollution can have some serious health impacts.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that, as countries develop and urbanize, they have to really think about those environmental consequences. How do you balance economic growth with sustainability?
It's a tough question, for sure. And one that, Thailand's not alone in grappling with. It's a global challenge.
For sure. It's amazing, right, how all these stories kind of come together to paint a picture of Thailand that, most tourists probably don't see.
Totally. We started off talking about tourism taxes, which, fair enough, that's directly related to tourism. But then we got into pension reforms, a monk mixed up in a pyramid scheme, and then some pretty serious crime stories.
It's like a whole other side of Thailand, right? Beyond those idyllic beaches and temples, there's this whole other world of, like, social issues and economic pressures and political intrigue.
And I think what's so cool about using this German language podcast, Thailand Aktuell, as our source, is that it gives us this totally fresh perspective. It's like, what are the issues that are resonating with German speakers who are interested in Thailand? It's not necessarily the same stuff that, we might typically see in English language media.
It's a good reminder that there's always more than one way to look at things, and that seeking out those diverse perspectives can really enrich our understanding not just of Thailand, but of the world in general.
Absolutely. So for anyone listening who's feeling inspired to dig a little deeper into Thailand, I highly recommend checking out Thailand Aktuell. Even if you don't speak German, you can kind of get a sense of the topics they're covering just by browsing through their episode titles.
Mm.
And it might even spark some ideas for your own exploration. Like, what are the news sources in other countries saying about the places you're interested in?
That's such a great point. And this deep dive has really just scratched the surface. Each of those headlines we talked about could be a whole episode in itself. So if any of those topics really grabbed your attention, I encourage you to do some more research, see what else you can find out. It's a fascinating world out there.
It really is. And I think what I'll take away from all this is just how dynamic Thailand is as a country.
Yeah.
There's always something new happening, something changing, something to learn. And that's pretty exciting.
I agree. It's a reminder that, even places we think we know well can still surprise us. And that's the beauty of travel and exploration and, even just paying attention to the news. You never know what you're going to discover.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Well, on that note, thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of Thailand Actual. We'll catch you next time.